Right now, someone with less talent, less intelligence, and less experience than you is winning. And the reason is brutally simple. They appear more certain. They talk like they already belong. They move like everything is theirs. They walk into a room and the air bends around them, not because they're better, but because they believe they should be there. And the world, blind to depth but hyper-aware of dominance, believes them too. While you wait for clarity, they act with conviction. While you search for the perfect words, they speak as if their words create reality. And while you doubt yourself quietly, they claim what you were qualified for but hesitant to reach for. That's how it works. The ones who hesitate give ground. The ones who speak without apology take it. It's not about skill. It's about certainty. The world doesn't follow the most capable. It follows the most convinced. The man who moves like he already owns everything is the man people unconsciously adjust themselves around even if he has nothing. And you need to let that settle, because it explains the core reason why you've been bypassed, overlooked, underestimated. It's not that you weren't good enough. It's that you didn't move like you were. Confidence is not some magical trait reserved for the lucky or extroverted. It's not an emotion that shows up when things are going well. It's not something you feel your way into. Confidence is a decision. It's a weapon. It's a tool of control. And here's the harsh truth. If you don't carry it, someone else will use it against you. And you'll watch them take what you've earned, not because they deserve it, but because they convinced everyone they did. Machiavelli knew this long before boardrooms and dating apps existed. He saw it in palaces, in battlefields, in whispers of political strategy. The bold take ground, even when they're unqualified. The hesitant stay behind, even when they're brilliant. Because power doesn't belong to the most virtuous. It doesn't reward the quietly competent. Power belongs to the man who moves without hesitation. Power favors the one who does not flinch. This isn't about motivation. This isn't about feeling good. This is about rewiring the way you operate permanently. It's about stripping out the weakness that was taught to you. And make no mistake, you were taught to be hesitant. You were trained to wait, to obey, to earn permission before taking action. It didn't come from malice. It came from a world that fears independent men. So it dressed obedience up as politeness, hesitation as caution, and approval-seeking as humility. You were rewarded for asking, "Is this okay?" You were praised for being the nice guy, the considerate one, the one who makes room for others. And every time you did, a piece of your authority was chipped away. Now what lives inside you isn't a leader. It's not even a man. It's a servant. A domesticated version of you that waits for direction, fears judgment, and panics at the thought of rejection. That voice that stops you before you speak, that whispers that you're not ready, that you might offend someone that's not your instinct. That's your programming. And if you don't kill that programming, it will keep you on your knees. You were not born afraid. You were made afraid. Conditioned through repetition to ask before you act, to explain before you lead, to shrink before you speak. And every time you did, the world rewarded you for being manageable. But manageable men don't get chosen. They get used. You were taught to be safe, not sovereign. So, now, your journey begins with inversion. Every moment you feel yourself contracting, expand. Every urge to explain, pause. Every instinct to soften your presence, harden it. This isn't about pretending to be someone you're not. It's about returning to who you were before the world softened your edges. The version of you that didn't apologize for breathing. Because dangerous confidence doesn't emerge from external validation. It's born the moment you decide to do what your inner servant fears the most: move with finality. Speak without apology. Exist without permission. You stop playing small. You walk with a little more command. You take up physical space, vocal space, emotional space. You stop muting yourself to make others comfortable. You stop waiting for the world to notice you and start acting like it already has. Because confidence at this level isn't a mindset, it's an identity. And identities are forged in rebellion against who you were, not who they are. And that rebellion starts now. The version of you that still wants to be liked, that still worries what they'll say, that still hesitates before stepping forward, kill it. Kill the thought, kill the habit, kill the behavior. If it makes you doubt yourself, confront it. If it urges you to wait, ignore it. If it wants to be accepted, laugh in its face. Because the world doesn't respect kindness, it uses it. It doesn't respond to politeness, it steamrolls it. Machiavellian truth is cruel but clean. Nice men are tools, and when their usefulness runs out, they're discarded without thought. The powerful are not cruel, but they are precise. They are controlled. They are calculated. And that begins with cutting out the voice in your head that still begs to be included. You don't need permission. You don't need validation. You don't need to explain yourself. You only need one thing, the willingness to become feared. Not by others, but by your former self. Because once you kill the servant, the ruler can rise. And rulers don't ask. They move. The truly powerful don't storm in shouting for attention. They don't chase eyes or raise their voice. They arrive with energy, stillness, weight. Their presence creates tension. Their silence carries volume. They don't need to be the center. They are the center. You don't need to dominate with noise. You need to master the art of influence without effort. You don't need to be recognized to be respected. What you need is presence, the kind that shifts the dynamic of a room without a single word spoken. This is how men of real power move. Quiet, cold, clear. They're not loud, but the room bends around them. They don't explain, because their certainty is louder than any words. They don't chase connection, they control access. Machiavelli saw this in the courts. The man who says the least, but moves with the most certainty, is the one the kings and nobles adjust themselves around. And that's the paradox you must now embrace. Silence is your strength. Calm is your leverage. Precision is your language. You don't speak to impress. You speak to declare. Every sentence you say should feel like a decision, not a suggestion. You stop softening your tone. You stop rising at the end of your sentences. You stop looking for the reaction. You speak, and you let others deal with the weight of your words. Because from this point forward, you are no longer participating in the world as someone hoping to be accepted. You are stepping into it as someone who decides what happens next. Not because you were invited, but because you no longer wait to be. And this is where the silent war truly begins, not the kind of war with weapons, but one fought in the shadows of intimacy, in the pauses of conversations, in the subtle shifts of tone and gesture. He starts noticing the contradictions in her words, the way she says one thing but means another, how she praises him publicly but emasculates him in private, how she acts like a victim, yet subtly controls every aspect of the relationship. At first, he questions himself. Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe I'm just insecure. But deep down, something feels off. He starts walking on eggshells, not because he's weak, but because he cares. He wants peace. He doesn't want to fight. He just wants to be loved. But that's when the manipulation gets stronger. She starts testing his boundaries, slowly, cleverly. A passive-aggressive comment here, a silent treatment there, a flirtation with another man disguised as a joke. He reacts, and suddenly he's the problem. Suddenly he's too controlling, too emotional, too intense. She flips the script so smoothly that even he starts to doubt his own instincts. Gaslighting becomes the norm. He begins apologizing for things he didn't do. He starts explaining himself for things that shouldn't need explanation. His confidence, once rooted in strength, starts to erode. Not because he lacks value, but because he's being conditioned to forget it. But the real tragedy is that no one sees it. Because she's charming, she's sweet, she's the one crying in public saying, "I just want him to be more understanding," and the world believes her. Because society is quick to assume that if a man is angry, he must be guilty. But no one asks why he's angry. No one looks at the slow psychological death he's been enduring behind closed doors. People only see the explosion, not the pressure cooker that built up to it. They don't see the nights he stayed silent to avoid conflict. They don't see the hours he spent trying to make her happy, only to be met with coldness or sarcasm. They don't see how every time he asserted himself, it was twisted into aggression. This is the invisible abuse that men aren't allowed to speak about. Because when a man talks about his pain, he's called bitter. When he sets a boundary, he's labeled toxic. When he walks away, he's accused of being afraid of commitment. The double standard is deafening. He's expected to be stoic, unshaken, emotionally bulletproof. But he's still human. And the cost of constantly suppressing that pain? It starts to show up in unhealthy ways. In silence, in rage, in withdrawal. He loses touch with who he is not because he's weak, but because he's been psychologically deconstructed piece by someone who claims to love him. And then comes the breaking point. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. A moment of clarity in the middle of an argument. A realization that he no longer recognizes himself. That he's become a man who second-guesses his worth, who seeks approval from someone who only values him when he's obedient. And suddenly, the illusion shatters. He sees it all clearly, the manipulation, the control, the slow erosion of his spirit. And that's when the real fight begins. Not with her, but within himself. Because walking away is not just about leaving her. It's about unlearning the belief that love is supposed to hurt. That sacrifice means losing yourself. That masculinity is proven through silent endurance. It's about reclaiming the parts of himself that were buried under guilt, shame, and fear. But the world doesn't make that easy. Even when he leaves, he's judged. Why couldn't you just make it work? Maybe you weren't man enough to handle her. But they don't understand this wasn't love. It was control dressed up as intimacy. It was dependency sold as devotion. And leaving wasn't failure, it was survival. This is the chapter no one wants to talk about. The moment a man stops being the villain in her story and starts becoming the hero of his own. It's not pretty. It's not celebrated. But it's necessary. Because real healing doesn't happen in comfort. It happens when you face the truth without flinching. When you admit to yourself that love should never cost you your sanity. That being a good man doesn't mean being a silent one. That strength is not measured by how much pain you can endure, but by how boldly you can walk away from what no longer serves your soul. And when he does that, when he finally chooses himself over the illusion, something powerful is born. Not revenge, not resentment, but rebirth. He starts to rebuild not just his life, but his identity. He learns to trust his instincts again, to speak without apology, to lead without guilt, and most importantly, to love himself without needing permission. Because in the end, he was never asking for too much. He was just asking the wrong person.